if someone's in a different land, you get a different set of names. Now think about that again. If you had to make up that story about, people in France 100 years ago, would you have got the right sort of names? If you had to write a story about people in Egypt 100 years ago, would you get the right sort of names? You might have some vague idea of Arab names, but would you know how the names in Egypt differ from the names in Jordan, differ from the names in Syria? Unless you've been in those countries, you'd have no idea. And even if you have lived in those countries, I'm not sure your intuitions as to what the most common names would be a very reliable guide. Now again, we've got another survey. We've got some surveys tonight. And one of the surveys I've got is this. Has anyone had the experience of naming a child, giving that child what they thought was an unusual name, only to find out as soon as they've named the child that lots of other children have got the same name? Okay? So we've got at least one here, we've got another one here, another one there, another one there. Yeah, okay. That's right. Why is that? Because our intuitions as to what the most common names are aren't always completely reliable. So that's something that's quite common because our intuitions are just based on a smaller data sample. So even if people were making up stories in the land, they wouldn't be able to get the names in the right proportion. Back then, they didn't have any of those magazines that told you what the most common names were. So what we find is this is a remarkable thing. But the story goes on. You see, it's not just that they have the right proportion of names, they have the right features of names. You see, what happens if you call out Simon? Well, there are lots of Simons, aren't there? So then we've got to do what Wikipedia calls disambiguation. You've got to distinguish one Simon from another Simon. And you find that's what they do in the New Testament. Jesus had two of his 12 disciples called Simon. One was Simon with an extra bit, Peter or Cephas. One was Simon with an extra bit, the Zealot or the Canaanite. So you've got a disambiguation. And then you read other disambiguations. Jesus went and had a meal with someone called Simon the leper, but he wasn't a leper at the time because people were sitting around having a meal with him. Maybe Jesus had healed him. Simon of Cyrene carried the cross. There were lots of Simons around, so you better distinguish this one. Simon Peter in the book of Acts stayed with someone called Simon the tanner or the leather worker. So you find they distinguish them. Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James and Joseph. So you find that they make sure that these most common names are distinguished and not the less common names. It could be adding a father's name, a job, a hometown. It doesn't matter, but you've got to do something to set them apart. Now, how could someone making up stories outside the land do that? Now, I've got another survey. Anyone here find it difficult to remember names? We got 2 honest people, 3 honest people, 4. Anyone else? Come on. No, don't be shy. Any more people honest? Raise hands, please. You find it difficult to remember names? Okay, yeah. Now, I've forgotten so many names since I arrived here yesterday, and I have been witness to 5 name-forgetting events from other people, where they've said, I cannot remember this person, but I could tell you all sorts of things about them. You could say what car they drive, you could say how many family members they've got, you could say what state they used to live in, everything. You could say about them except that vital piece of information you need in the social setting to introduce them. I bet you tonight, some of you are going to have that situation. Yeah? It may already be happening. You're looking around, you're thinking, that person over there, I really know their name. It's just on the tip of my tongue, but it's just slipped me for a moment. I know, we had a daughter stay in our house for a month. But, what is it? Names just are so forgettable. Why is it? Because usually there is no logical connection between a name and the person. There's no logical reason for that person to have that name. And there's lots of logical reasons why that person shouldn't have that name sometimes. So that's why we forget names. We remember things about people, but names are amongst the hardest things to remember. Stories are easy to remember, names are hard to remember. Which means that you can watch a film, and you watch a film and you remember what everyone does, you remember what the minor characters do. Do you remember the minor characters' names? No. Do you even remember the major characters' names? Not always. You go away on holiday and you meet some people who are really interesting and you come back and you tell your friends about them, but you might even just drop out the names of these interesting people because the really interesting thing is to tell them the story. So what we find is that names are one of those forgettable things that can just drop out very easily. So think about this. If the Gospels have correctly got the detail that's the hardest sort of thing to remember, isn't there every reason to think they could get the other things right? The story bits, that who was with whom, where they went, what they did, that's easy compared with getting names right. But we're finding that they get the names right. And that to me suggests that we are not getting these stories 5th or 6th or 19th hand. Because if it had happened 19th hand or even 5th hand, you wouldn't get the names right. It wouldn't be happening regularly. So that just won't explain it. The only way we can get this pattern is if we have not just eyewitness testimony, but high quality eyewitness testimony. That's what we've got going on. Now I want to take this idea a little bit further. Now you've all heard, I'm sure, about apocryphal gospels, and people have said, hey, what about having some other gospels in the Bible? Well, let's just look at how they do on other names. So the Gospel of Thomas, one of the most popular ones that people talk about. And you look at how does it do with Palestinian Jewish names? You know, not very well. The main character is called Didymus Judas Thomas, which means twin, Judas twin, which is just not the sort of name people were called back then. You could look at another gospel, the Gospel of Mary. It doesn't even call Jesus Jesus, it just calls him the Savior. And it's, which Mary? We have no idea. And then you've got the Gospel of Judas, which was published recently, and it's got 2 Palestinian Jewish names. You know, Jesus and Judas. And then it's got a whole load of people from outer space. So that, to me, is not very impressive. I don't look at it and think, wow, didn't they know the time and place really well? We could take it a bit further. Let's look at the names in Matthew. Take the list of the 12 disciples in Matthew. We find a remarkable correlation between the list of names here and statistics that have just been found in the last 10 years. I have put in brackets next to a name the rank of that name for Palestinian Jewish males if it is in the top 99 names. And what we find is if it's one of the more common names, it has a qualifier. If it's not one of the more common names, it does not have a qualifier. Let's go through the list. So, Simon, ranked number 1, qualifier, called Peter, and Andrew, not ranked, his brother. So Andrew's just given with reference to Simon. James, high ranking, 11. The son of Zebedee, and John, rank 5, his brother. Philip, low ranking, 61st equal, no qualifier. Bartholomew, 50th equal, low ranking,